All right, so good morning, good afternoon, good evening to everyone, and thanks for joining us from around the globe. Welcome to the webinar, and my name is Tanmay, and I'm part of the Basecamp developer community team. Today we have Temenos experts who are going to unpack Quantum V9 SP1 and discuss the release that is loaded with many new features. V9 Service Pack 1 release of Temenos Quantum enables faster delivery of multi-experience solutions through improved productivity and tooling performance. Also includes many enhancements to responsive web. So let me introduce you all to experts we have today. We have Matt Terry, Senior Vice President, Product Management. We have Faizan Khalidi, who's Senior Director, Product Management, and Matt Trevathan, Vice President, Product Management. Now, there are a few things before we start the session. As you know, we have a Q&A panel active, so make use of that. Make sure you post your questions in the Q&A panel, not in the chat window. We have moderators actively monitoring the Q&A panel, so post it over there, and we'll give you answers as and when that is possible. Also, we are recording this webinar, and this webinar will be added on Basecamp. The recorded version will be added on Basecamp for later consumption, so you can even share it with your friends or colleagues in case they missed it today. So thank you all once again. Now let me invite Matt to take it up and start the session. Over to you, Matt. Thank you.
Great. Thanks, Tanmay. And thanks, everyone, for joining. Really appreciate you guys investing the time. I'm going to start with an overview of the Quantum platform for those folks that are maybe new, joining us for the first time, one of our overview webinars. And then I'll hand it over to Faizan and Matt, and then I'll pick it up again at the end. Next slide. So in this first section, I'm just going to go through a quick overview. Maybe some folks are new to the Quantum platform. This is the highest level product diagram that we provide, showing the subcomponents of the Quantum platform. The Nitro engine, which is our omni-channel framework that allows us to do cross-channel development. And then the major components that we're going to really be talking about today are there in the middle. Visualizer, the front-end design tool, Fabric, the back-end services, and then the DevOps and automated testing layer that helps us test the applications and deploy them. So there's quite a few updates in there as well. We won't be touching too much on the cloud hosting piece, but we do obviously offer this as a cloud managed service across different cloud providers and on-prem. But this gives you a quick overview of what's inside the Quantum platform that we're covering today. We launched our major release, version 9, back in April of this year. So what we're covering today is our first update to that, our Service Pack 1. So this is V9 Service Pack 1 that we're going to walk you through. These are the various investment themes, the way we've organized this webinar. So the first few is what Faizan will take you through, then Matt, and then me. The modern web experiences and responsive web is really focused on being able to build those web experiences faster and easier. There's a lot of component enhancements. This is important because we continue to move to a more modular architecture, making it easier to swap in and out components. This is also a powerful feature as Quantum is used by a lot of the other products within Temenos. So if you're used to the other products in Temenos, such as from the Infinity brand or Transact, they use Quantum to deliver their products. So a lot of the features you see here, especially the component enhancements, allows them to build those applications faster, make them easier to maintain and upgrade. So you'll see a lot of those features mapping to how those teams are going to use those new capabilities. And then improve productivity and tooling. Faizan will show us some additional features there in Visualizer, DevOps and automated testing around our build, CI/CD. And then I'll pick back up with the application workflow. That was a new powerful feature in V9, where there's a lot of new capabilities around orchestration and workflow that we've continued to invest in. So I'll walk you through what's new there. And then there's a few other updates to the Fabric backend services that I'll cover before we show you kind of the other smaller Quantum enhancements that we weren't able to cover today, and we'll wrap it up. So that's the quick overview of what you're going to see. And with that, I will turn it over to Faizan to start our first section.
Thank you, Matt. So I'm going to cover 3 sections today, and the first one is going to talk about the modern web experiences and responsive web. So over the past couple of years, we've been investing quite a bit in the web experiences and ensuring that the responsive web experience is easy to use, and it's not just easy to use on the canvas, within Visualizer with all the tooling, but it's it's performing faster with all the modern web experiences included in it. So a few new features that we have added within this area with the Service Pack 1 is the addition of this new responsive grid layout. Right, so the responsive grid layout enables a Bootstrap-based responsive grid experience with what you already have within the responsive web channel today. Right, so we'll walk through a demo of this and see how that works. We have also added the support for the responsive support for segment templates. So what this does is it allows you to use different segment templates for each of the breakpoints within your responsive web channel, right? So if you have a form where you are using a segment, now you can use a different segment for each of the breakpoint within the segment widget. And you also now have the ability to map data uniquely for each of the different breakpoints, right? So if you're using different templates, you can map different data to each of the different templates as well. Apart from that, we have invested a bit in the accessibility aspect of responsive web, ensuring that we keep meeting those the WCAG standards for accessibility. So we have added this new feature, which basically allows you to specify the order in which the widgets must be focused in a form during the keyboard navigations when you are using the tab key, right? So when you're using the tab key and trying to navigate between widgets, you can as well define the order in which you want to, navigate the user through those widgets. And finally, the last thing over here is the ability to generate web archive locally. So what this means is now you can also, instead of just directly always publishing to the Fabric environment, you can generate a web archive locally, right? So this gives you an ability to generate that web application locally, and then you can, if you want to pick it up and then manually go in and install it into your Fabric environment, you still can, go to Fabric and import it there and then install it as well, or publish it as well. So there's a new post-build action that's been added when you are trying to do builds for the web, and through that post-build action, you will be able to see the generate web archive locally option. So with that, we'll go to the demo for the responsive grid layout, right? So what we have added is, a grid-like experience within responsive web. So this means that the responsive web page is divided into columns now. So what you see over here is what we are going to design using this new grid layout. And this responsive grid view has 12 columns and has a total width of 100%. And it'll shrink and expand as you resize the browser widget, right? So the first thing that you notice here in my canvas is this new layout type called responsive grid. Now let me drag and drop a few widgets on top of my canvas. So what you'll see here is that, I have a new set of properties under the Look tab. So this allows us to use the properties like span and offset to design a grid-like layout for the responsive web pages. Let's see how that works, right? So I've dragged and dropped this header over here, which spans 12 columns across in all the different breakpoints. So that we have 3 breakpoints here: 640, 1024, and 1238. And I've used the same 12-column layout across. Now, if I change that and change it to a 6-column layout, you see that it uses just 6 of the columns. You also have the ability to turn on the responsive grid background, where you can actually it helps users add a ruler kind of experience where you see how many grids each of your widget takes, right? So that's what we see over here. And so this kind of simplifies how you are creating that responsive experience across all the different breakpoints based on the number of columns that you are using. Not only span to use the number of columns, but we have this option of offset as well, which you'll see in a minute, right? So here in this in my smallest breakpoint for mobile, I'm using all 12 columns. In tablet, I'm using 6 columns each, and then on the largest breakpoint, I'm using 4 columns for my for this left widget, and then I'm using an offset to move the entire component over to a couple of columns, right? So I can do that. I can add some spacing between each of these components by adding some offset for the second component as well. So this responsive grid layout works in tandem with the existing breakpoint specific layout forking that users use today, right? So you can still go ahead and you can at each of the breakpoints you can switch the breakpoint tab at the top and apply those breakpoint forking mechanisms that you do today as well, right? So both of those work in tandem. So now let me go and build this in Inline Preview. So once I build this, you'll see that in my smallest breakpoint, the lowest breakpoint, what's happening is it's occupying all the 12 columns. And on the tablet breakpoint, it occupies 6 columns each. And then as soon as I move to the largest breakpoint, it has an offset of 2 columns. Then the middle portion where you see the user's details, those portions are divided into 2 columns offset, 4 columns for the left component, then 4 columns for the right component, and 2 columns offset. So that's how simple it is now to divide your application designs into a column-based layout and use that column-based layout to design your responsive screens. Okay, so with that, we'll move to the next section, which is about component enhancements. So we've made a lot of enhancements to the components feature itself. So you are aware of the components feature where we have different types of components that you can build, like components with contracts and components without contracts. So each of these types of components, we have made enhancements in all the different channels, right? So the first enhancements that we're going to talk about is the capability to create a responsive component itself. So what this allows users to do is create a component with different breakpoints and with a different layout on each of the different breakpoints, right? So we'll see that in a minute in a demo. And then the next feature that we have added is the ability to add versioning to the component itself. So now you can, now users can add versioning for components in an application, and this helps developers to add new features to an existing instance of a component by upgrading it to a new version, right? We'll see a demo of that as well. And the last couple of features are, adding the support for component, tracking and dropping a component without a contract in a segment widget. And then finally, we have also made some enhancements to the web component wrapper, where you now have the capability to see the reflection of the properties from the web library onto the canvas. And you have the capability to order the library files that you include in the web component wrapper. You can control how those you can control the loading sequence of those library files now. And we added the capabilities like auto generation of the templates within the wrapper file itself. But the two major features that we are going to focus on today and see a demo of are the first, the responsive components, and the component versioning. So this is the feature of responsive components. So what we're going to see here is I'm going to create a component over here, and you'll see how we can design this component with the responsive breakpoint. So I'll open the responsive canvas, right? I'll switch to the responsive web canvas. That's the first thing that you'll notice here. And in this responsive canvas, both the responsive grid layout that we just saw in the other demo, as well as the breakpoint specific forking is respected by the components, right? So I dragged and dropped this component over here within, and you see that within each of the different breakpoints, I have a different layout. So I'll go to the lowest breakpoint, and I can, switch the breakpoint forking at the top here, if you notice that, and I'll change the text for the email and make it email ID for the lowest breakpoint. So that change has just happened on the lowest breakpoint, right? If I switch to my if I switch to my form, you'll notice you'll notice that in each of the different breakpoints, I have this the email field that's different. So let me switch to the form and add the specific component onto the form. Right, so here on the form, you'll see the same changes as well. So on the lowest breakpoint, you have the email ID text, and then on the higher breakpoint, you have the email text. So let's make a couple of other changes as well. So on the highest breakpoint as well, I quickly make the change on my component. And then if I switch back to my form, you'll see that, the change reflects there as well. So from a single component, I'm managing the changes on the different instances of the component on each of the forms as well. Now, the last thing you'll see is the same component is being used on my mobile native as well as my mobile tablet. And you see how, using the responsive grid layout, it takes the correct, layout for each of the different form factors over here. So on the tablet, it's taking the layout which I've used for the tablet breakpoint. On the mobile, it's taking the lowest breakpoint. So I can use the same component now, not just for responsive web for different breakpoints, but I can use the same component for my mobile and tablet native as well, right? So that's the that's the advantage of using the responsive component with SP1. And the next demo that we are going to view is about the component versioning. So as you notice, we created a component, and you notice a version along with that component now, right? So we have a version 1.0.0. If you notice on the left side on the component tab, you notice that I have a version number associated with the component, and I'm using this component in the form already. So now let me go ahead and make changes to the properties of the component at the form level. So I changed the date of birth field to call it DOB. And then let me change the default date in the calendar as well to 21st May 2020. So I made a couple of changes to the instance of my component. And you see this component has like 8 different entry fields. I'll go ahead and, create a duplicate of this component and, create a version 2 of the same component, right? So I go in and duplicate the component and create a version 2.0 of the same component. So I'll add a version here. We'll say OK, and I'll create another version of it. Now in the in this version 2.0 of the component, I'll go and make a few changes where I pretty much remove a couple of those entry fields. So we'll remove the citizenship status and the email ID fields from this version of the component. So I'm deleting both these fields so that the version 2 of the component is different from the version 1 in the type of widgets, in the number of widgets it uses, right? It uses. So now that I have the version 2 of the widget over here, and you see the same properties are still being used by this version 2 of the component, I'll go to the form and I'll go to the instance of the component which was using version 1, and then I'll replace this version with my latest version of the component, which is version 2.0. So you'll notice that as soon as I do that, the number of widgets that are being shown on the for this component on the form changes to the number of widgets I had on the second version, which is 6. And the next thing you'll notice is that the property changes that I had made on the instance remain intact, right? So I'm not overriding the property changes that the user had done on the instance. All of those property changes still remain intact while you are just upgrading to the latest version of the component. So here users are allowed to use different versions of components in different instances as well. So you can have like two forms, one with each version of the component instance. That's allowed as well. And like we talked about, this helps developers to add new features to an existing instance of a component by easily upgrading the instance of the component to a newer version. Okay, so with that, let's move to the last section that I'll be covering, and this has quite a few demos that I'll walk you through. We've made enhancements to the overall tooling experience within Visualizer and within the Quantum app as well with this release. So this not only helps developers increase the overall productivity, but it simplifies the usage of Visualizer. It helps users to easily build applications, debug their applications, and finally basically develop their applications much faster as well. So we'll cover these 5 features today. I'll start with find and replace skin properties. Now, what this allows is this adds a new feature which helps you to find and replace skin properties for widgets that are being used across the project. Right, so this feature enables you to customize the properties of the skins, like the background, like the background colors, the background images, the borders, the fonts, all from a single location at the project level. And it basically provides a convenient and easy way for developers to reskin a base application based on their design and branding requirements. Right, so let's see a quick demo of how this works. So I already have an application over here in Visualizer, which if you notice, it has an orange button on the canvas. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to try and change the color of those buttons. So what you see over here is I have this utility option where I can go in and I can select find and replace skin properties. Here I have a couple of options to select widget type and the property type. When I select widget type, in the drop-down, you see a list of all the widgets that are available in my application. I can select a specific widget, or I can select all of these widgets that I want to change. Once I select those, I have an option to select the property type that I want to replace, and I select the background type over here. Now, what I'm doing is I'm selecting the current value of the background type that I want to replace across the entire application. So I select the background, the orange color, and this is applied on multiple places across my application, on buttons, on labels and things like that. And I'm applying a new color to that, which is a dark shade of blue. So if you notice, as soon as I did that and said OK, what it does is it goes through the entire application and looks for that specific orange background color and replaces all of that with that dark blue color. And once it does that, it gives me all the skins that it has changed as part of my console logs, so that I know that which of these skins have been changed when I made that change. So you see that every form across the application reflects the change that I have done through the find and replace skin properties. So this basically makes it easy for me to replace these skin properties directly from a single place within the entire project. So the next feature we're going to talk about is the simplified emulator setup. So what so this was basically one of the most requested feature post V9 to re-enable the use of emulators, especially for iOS directly from Visualizer, right? So we didn't have an ability to go in directly and launch the emulator on Xcode and then generate a build that could launch on that emulator. But what this feature provides is the capability to directly launch or view the emulators within Visualizer and run your applications and debug your applications directly on that emulator itself. So we've been working on this, and with this release, we have made this experience even simpler, right? So now if you go into build a native local, you see that I have an option that says mobile emulators, and it shows all the emulators that I have historically connected to. Now I'll just go and launch the emulator, and as soon as I do that, and I come, so here I'm launching iOS emulator. Let's go and check what version it does. It's still it's for iPhone 11, right? So it exactly matches what I used last time. So I'll just go back into Visualizer and refresh it. And as soon as I refresh it, it notices that I have an active emulator running. I'll go in, build my application for running it on the iOS emulator. And I do that, and the application gets built and launches on the emulator, and I can start using it there. Not only that, I can launch Safari and connect to this particular iOS emulator over here. And once I do that, I can, start debugging my application. So here I can, watch expression, navigate through each of my lines of code, and set breakpoints and do all the debugging that you do with your applications on when you connect to an emulator, or you can even connect to a direct device as well. The next feature we're going to talk about is the hot reload capability. So we have added a hot reload capability for web, and this feature basically allows Visualizer to instantly display modifications that are made to a form or the form controller using the Inline Preview, right? So let's see how that works. I have this application over here, and let me do a quick preview of this application using Inline Preview. So I go ahead and build this app for Inline Preview. And once I do that, I have this application running. So I'll navigate through a few forms over here, right? And I'll get to, what I call the form details, where I have a form where the user can enter all his details. So I'm going to go in and make a few changes to the specific form. So now I'll go in and, let's just make a simple change, like changing the text on that button from continue to submit. So I've done that. And now I just need to, do a quick hot reload. That's what I did. And you see that the same form gets updated without me having to navigate all the way from form 1 onto the specific form that I was making changes to. So I can do a quick Command-Shift-R and, do a hot reload of the form, which shows all the changes that I've been doing to that specific form. Okay, so the next feature we're going to talk about is the Quantum App Debugger. So what we have done here is we have added this capability within the Quantum app to view the detailed debug logs right within the app itself while previewing your native applications. Now, this is available for local preview as well as for cloud preview as well. So let's look at a quick demo. So what you'll notice is that in the settings, you have an option to enable logs now, and users, can launch their applications in the Quantum app, and I've clicked on a couple of buttons, and I have this option now. When you either shake your device and look at the menu, or the same way you used to go to Notes. Earlier, you can go to the notes here as well and view the logs. And you can also copy, download, and share these logs, as well as you have an option to, you can clear the logs if you want to see a new set of logs as well. Users can also choose to either view the full framework logs or filter to just view their print statements. Right, and these are, like I said, available for both, local preview as well as a cloud preview. So this is an example of how I would launch these on a cloud preview. So I'll go ahead and do a cloud preview here, where I'm using the preview code from the cloud. I'll go into the logs. I'll set that on, and then make some changes on my application. I'll click on a couple of buttons over here which generate my logs. And here you see that I have the full framework logs that I can see. Now I can switch to the print logs where I can specifically see the print statements within my code. And then, like I said, of course, you have the ability to copy, download, share, and clear these logs as well. So the last feature that we're going to talk about today is, the AI-assisted development. So while continuing our enhancements of AI-assisted development within the Quantum platform, we have added a new feature that helps developers with, commonly required best practices and development guardrails within, while they are developing a project within Visualizer. So AI-assisted development works in combination with Quantum IQ to analyze the application, and it informs the users and fixes some of the issues that you may have while you are developing the application in Visualizer, right? So let's see how this works. So we have this new option under Help that says AI-assisted development. Once you click that, you see several different options here, like best practices, performance improvements, and style guide improvements that you can make to your application. You can select all of these, and you have an option where you can go to settings and you can update the rules that are applied based on what we're trying to when we're trying to use these best practices, right? So here, what I'm trying to do is the rule where I can remove unused skins from my application. I can, whitelist some of the skins and say I want to ignore, I specifically want to ignore those skins while I am removing all the other unused skins. So what it does is I quickly select those options to remove unused skins, and it goes ahead and clears all of those from my applications. So it does a lot of this. It helps review applications for, unused resources, skins, widgets. It also helps developers check for, some design best practices with tools like to check if the same font family is used across the applications, or to check the correct usage of app menu and, and similar widgets as well. And of course, you have those settings to ignore the values where the rules should not apply while you are using them. So all of these are also available through the Quantum IQ as well. So you can go to Quantum IQ and you can request for the same kind of assistance through Quantum IQ. You can ask IQ to clean your resources, or to remove unused skins and things like that. So all of this it works in combination with Quantum IQ. So I think that's all from my side, and now I hand it over to Matt Trevathan.
Great. Good day, everybody. We'll just continue on. We've done a lot of work in the DevOps App Factory area and automated testing. I'm going to highlight some of the key points today as we go through this section with a few lightweight demos of some of the new features. Next slide, please. There are 5 areas that I'm going to focus on. The first one is going to be the simplified build setup. Now, we're moving some of the things that if you use App Factory and you're used to using the rebuild function, because there's a lot of reuse of some of the parameters that we send in, we're moving some of these parameters into 2 different places. One is one that you're already used to, which is in the project settings. When you start building the project, and we're also creating a project settings area. Go ahead and pull up the demo. So what I mean by that is we've done a couple things here. First, if you're not building a visualizer or a Fabric app, hit play for me, please. If you're not building a visualizer or you're not building a Fabric app, then you don't need to have those parameters sitting inside of your build parameters list inside of App Factory. So what we've done is, if you click the visualizer, it's going to find where your Git repository is and those settings for your repo. But what it's also going to do is, if I go to build inside of App Factory, the project, you're not going to see the settings for Fabric or Visualizer if you're not using them. Now, you can always go back into the product settings and click the checkbox and rebuild the project. You're not going to lose any data. to enable or disable Visualizer or Fabric. Hit the next slide. We're also we've done a good bit of improvement for two key features. One I'm going to show today, one I'm not. The first feature I'm not going to show is building pre and post processors as part of this release. If you're used to building Java pre and post processors for Infinity or other projects, then one of the things with App Factory has been that ability to also build those preprocessors as part of your build lifecycle. And we've included that in the V9 S1 release of App Factory. And go ahead and hit the next slide. Hit play for me. We've also, there it goes. We've also included support for custom hooks. Now, if you're using client builds for Visualizer, you're familiar with custom hooks. And in this case, I'm actually deploying Postman scripts. There's an article out on Basecamp about doing this where you can support Postman as a second-class citizen. And I'm taking and building me some Postman scripts via Ant. Ant's kind of my driver file for my custom hook, so that any time that I run my Fabric build, I can actually, as part of the post build, run my Postman scripts to test the build. So as you can see here, I'm going to just run real quick, rebuild a application, hit rebuild. It's going to start into the Postman run, and it starts the build process. When this is done, I built a script that actually sends me an email with the collection results. So you can see the collection results here. So there's a lot of power that you get out of building with custom hooks that people have leveraged for building on the client side. We're now including that on the Fabric side too. Next slide, please. We're also adding in SonarQube support. I don't know if any of y'all are familiar with SonarQube. A good number of clients are. Now, we're not giving you a SonarQube reporting server. What we're allowing you to do, go ahead and hit the next slide. What we're going to allow you to do is connect to that server so that it will run your SonarQube report locally as part of the build for your client app. So here's that project settings I was talking about. The first thing that we've added are SonarQube settings. And as you can see, I can do different supported versions of SonarQube. I send in the URL for my server. I'm going to enter in my credentials so that I can talk using the Sonar token back to the server once I run the code coverage. And now, as part of my actual build process for Visualizer, it will run a SonarQube code scan and tell me my code coverage based off of that scan. So as you can see, it's very similar to setting up, if you've ever used the Jenkins plugin for SonarQube, it's very similar to setting that up. Once it's saved in these project settings, you don't have to come back here and do it again. You just come right back in, and anytime that you do a Visualizer build, it's going to run that code scan with those settings. So what we're doing right now is just quickly going down. We're starting a build that is running the SonarQube scan. So it's just filling out a few of the credentials that you have to do. And you can start to see here how we've reduced, although we're doing a client app, since we're not deploying some things on the other side like Fabric, you don't have to have those Fabric pieces inside of your application. So we're gonna hit build. And as you notice, once it starts the checkout, the first thing it's going to do is it's going to run those SonarQube scans. And then if we go over to SonarQube, you can see that we failed the code scan, but it shows everything that we have from bugs to code smells, etc. So this is built right into App Factory now. So if you've got a SonarQube reporting server, you can connect to that via App Factory and include that in your pipelines. Next slide. We've had a lot of requests for improved device management, and what that means inside of App Factory, if you're doing testing, go ahead and start the demo. If you're doing testing, you're familiar with the fact that sometimes you go get a really popular device. Let's say a Samsung S10 when it came out, and an hour goes by and you still don't have that device. Well, that's because the device farm, everyone wants that Samsung S10 device. So what we built here is the ability to go through and find devices, not just by the maker and the OS version and the model, but now I can actually look at the availability of devices, so I can create device pools based on the OS version, on the platform, on the maker, on the availability, which is very, very important. So I'm building a filter here, very, very quickly building a filter. And when this filter's done, it's just like invoking a device pool inside of App Factory today. So when you do your testing from App Factory during the build process, it's simply pulling the pool down. The difference here is I'm filtering the pool now based on probably the most important parameter, which is availability of the device, but also being able to find device that meet the OS levels and maker levels that I need. So real quick, I'm just running through here, going to do a real quick build, hitting my Jasmine or TestNG framework, and I come down. I'm going to select my devices from the device pool, and basically I would go through and build, and it will run the test on that device pool. Next demo, please. Finally, we're going to click on two things. There's a good bit of support in automated testing from Intellisense all the way down to alert pop-ups. The two that we want to cover in today, we're going to cover in the next couple, are being able to support editing a widget path while we're recording, and the second thing will be Intellisense. So let's go ahead and hit that final video for me. We had a lot of feedback that sometimes we get a component that's got a subcomponent that's got another widget or a similar widget, and as we're recording, if we go through now and I record that widget may be buried deeply within a component or have a similar name to another widget. And I go to replay that, and it's hard for the test recorder to determine which widget I actually tested with. So we give the ability, we'll go ahead and do a real quick playback of this. So you can see here, I have my text user. I've renamed that now. If I want to be able to go in, if I hit record and play, this user is going to fail when it plays back. And the reason that it fails is it's changed. It can also be buried in a component somewhere. So now we can come in, here we go, renaming. We're going to run the app, and the first time it passes, the second time it's going to fail. So since we changed it, since we recorded it, it's kind of a pain in the rear now. If I run the test will fail. When I come back to the test case, here we go. So we'll do a quick refresh here. Sorry to get a little tangential on this one. You can see the test case run, and because we've changed the name of that widget inside of our test case from the editor, you can see the test case fails. So before, I'd have to go to the physical code to change this, but as you can see, in this case, I go to form login. Right there, I can edit it right inside of the wizard. I can make that change, and if I run it again, you'll see that change pass. So this is useful if I change, like I pop it into a component or I change the name of it. I need to edit that widget path as the path or the name of it is changed. So it's going to run it again here, just like we ran a minute ago, and then it's ready to go. So now we're moving on to Intellisense. If you look at the Intellisense, I think all of us are familiar with it. In the first version of Jasmine, the testing framework that we put out, we didn't have Intellisense. So a lot of people were coming back and saying, look, there are a lot of times when I want to work with a script manually, I want to code it myself, and I like to be able to have some idea of what I'm coding to so I don't have to keep a cheat sheet next to me. That's basically what we've added here is the ability to quickly come in and tab over after I hit a dot and see what options that I have so that I can quickly understand the methods that I can invoke and invoke those methods with less typing than I would if I was doing this straight on. All right, I'm going to hand off to Mr. Terry now.
Great. Thanks, Matt, and thanks, Faizan, for taking us through that. All right, so in this last section, I'm going to cover some of the more back-end functionality features. The first one is around our back-end workflow and our orchestration that's happening inside the Fabric server. So this was a big feature of V9, and these are some additional capabilities we've added in this Service Pack 1 on V9. The first one is a timer task. So you now can put a timer inside your workflow and have it pause for a set amount of time, or you can set it an expression. We've done some enhancements to the workflow designer. If you've used it, since V9, you'll know that sometimes it's hard to get the arrows to do exactly what you want. So we've done a lot of improvements around productivity in the canvas that you'll see once you upgrade to 9.1. And then on the back end of the admin server, the Fabric runtime server, there's a new retry capability. So when you're monitoring your workflows, if they fail for some reason with a specific task, you can ask it to retry that task in case maybe the back end was temporarily down. And there's also a lot of additional information in that runtime console around the workflow, the data about the workflow that you'll see a little bit of. So I'll walk you through a demo now of this. I've created a brand new application in the Fabric console, so there's no services yet. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring in an existing workflow. It's a workflow we've used in some of our previous webinars and demos, and I'm going to modify that workflow. So from here, I can choose this demo loan approval workflow and bring this into my application, and I'm going to do a couple edits to it. If you're not familiar with this workflow, what it does is someone submits an application, we call it and get a credit score, we run a rule for eligibility, and then we make that decision and update the status of the application. Then there's an exclusive gateway that'll auto send an email approve or reject, or if the rule said do a manual review, it'll go into a task and let a person make the decision. So just for demo purposes, I'm going to add a timer. You know, after all the automation is done, we don't want the emails to go out to the users too quickly. We want it to make it look like we did a little bit of thought on it, because otherwise they get an email within, you know, a few seconds. So we're just going to put a timer here inside the workflow as an example. So when you're doing a timer, you can do fixed duration. You can just set it to wait for 3 minutes as soon as it hits that node. But we also found we needed to do a little bit more logic in some cases. So you can do expressions in the timer. So you can use variables that are in the workflow namespaces. So this is an example in the help text where you can grab when the workflow started, and you can say, you know, make sure the workflow has been active for at least 90 minutes before you pass this timer. And if it's already been 90 minutes, it'll go right through it. So it's just an example of being able to use an expression to decide how long you should wait when you hit this. So the other thing I want to be able to demo is what happens when a service fails. So maybe your backend is down and the workflow is going to fail, and you need to take care of that and retry it. So in this example workflow, we're invoking this Equifax Get Credit Score service. We're sending in their, you know, some of the data from the customer application object. So this is in this demo, it's just a mock service we're calling that returns a calculated credit score. So I'm going to introduce something in the logic to force this service to fail. So because this is a mock service, we have some logic here that's generating the credit score. I'm going to just add a line here to set the op status code to something that indicates a failure. So we're just mocking this up, but the normal use case would be that the backend, there's something wrong with the backend that generates this op status code. The workflow will see that, and it will actually fail the task. And I want to show you how the workflow handles that, and then how an administrator can retry it. Okay, so we're going to save the change to the service, and then we need to publish it out to our runtime. So in the console, you can choose your different environments that you're connected to, publish this out. Now, I created a brand new application, so it's only sending out the workflow that I pulled in, and you'll notice that the integration service, the Equifax service, was automatically added to the app. So it's a neat feature of Fabric where when you bring in a workflow, it brings in all the dependencies that workflow needs into your app. And then when you publish it, you have everything you need to make that workflow run. So this is the Fabric runtime admin console. So I want to be able to kick off this workflow. So this workflow is connected to a data object. It's a customer service application object. So what I want to do is I have to create a new application. So I could do this from the front-end client application, or from the admin, I can invoke the API just like the client would. So I'm just creating a new application. I'm just sending in the key fields that I need for the workflow to run. So because I've invoked this API, I've sent in a brand new data object. The associated workflow automatically starts. So I find my workflow. Here's a list of workflows. You can see the customer ID primary keys there on the left. That's a new feature to make it easy to find your specific workflow. And you'll see that mine's failed. And you can even look up exactly what happened. You see that the status code was an error code. So it failed. So from here, the admin can say, well, I want to retry it. So it tells me it's been submitted for retry. And then I refresh it, and I see that, well, it's failed again. right? Because the static service is going to keep failing. Now, if it was a real back-end service, we might contact that team. We would talk to them about what's wrong. As soon as they said it was back up, we could click retry and it would then succeed. So in this case, we have to go and fix my little piece of code here that broke it. So we're just going to take it out so that this service now succeeds the next time it's invoked. So we go back to the publish screen, and we just want to publish this one change. So it's now going to push this service out to that runtime. And now anyone that calls that service won't get the failure op status code anymore. So once the publish is complete, we can just flip back over to the admin console, retry it one more time. So it pulls up the error code that happened last. We tell it we would like to retry this task. So it's submitted that. And then when we refresh the workflow screen, we can see that it did execute it. It then continued down the workflow, right? And now it has stopped at our timer. So just to take a quick look back at what the workflow does and where we were in the flow. So the first service, the Equifax get credit score, is what failed. So as soon as we hit retry, it jumped through those other nodes, and then it hit our 3-minute timer, and that's where it will sit for 3 minutes. And then as soon as that's done, it'll continue down the workflow. And then just to give you an idea, we're not going to wait 3 minutes for that to finish, but if you're not familiar with our workflow feature, this is what it would look like after that schedule timer finishes. It would go through the rest of the events, and then it would be a completed workflow. So in this next section, I want to talk to you about a few other updates we've done to the Fabric backend services. The first one is, Fabric, when you build integration services, they have a whole set of connectors to various systems. We've released a new connector that's the Fabric admin connector. What this means is, from a client application, you can actually talk to the Fabric runtime and do certain administrative tasks, things that normally only the administrator could do. The reason we've rolled this out in this release is to manage our business rules. So there's a new feature in V9 to be able to create logic rules in Fabric where you send in a certain set of parameters and you get back a decision. There's one of those in that previous workflow. So the idea is that if you wanted to build a business-facing application with Visualizer that allowed those users to manage business rules in a nice business-focused user experience, you would need the ability to talk directly to the runtime, pull back the set of active rules, change the logic, and then submit it directly back to the admin server without having to go into the console, which is more of a developer persona. So the way this is being used, if you're familiar with our Infinity applications and Spotlight, this is one example of what the team is working on. This is just internal, but it gives you an idea of how they're able to put a more business-friendly experience in an application intended for non-technical users to manage rules. And what it's doing behind the scenes is it's talking directly to the Fabric runtime using that admin connector, getting back the active rules, displaying what it looks like to the user, and even letting that user change it. So this isn't anything that's live. It's just an example of what you're able to do with this Fabric admin connector to manage rules from an external application. So the next topic is the Enterprise App Store. So if you're using Fabric to distribute native binaries to your employees through our new Enterprise App Store service built into Fabric, one of the big feature requests was we need the ability to notify our users when a new application has been published. In our previous product, a long time back, we would send push notifications as soon as an admin updated the app. But we've changed that now where the client application manages his own messages to the user. This is similar to how public apps in the app stores do it. As soon as you open an app, it will tell you if there's an upgrade available. So we've rolled out that functionality in Fabric, where if you're distributing your native binaries through the Fabric server, you can set the policy on each client app. And then when you open the client app, if that version of the app has an upgrade policy, you'll automatically get the message. And if you click the action button, it'll take you to the Enterprise App Store to do the upgrade. So this is the screen inside the Fabric console where you would go into your list of environments. You would then choose to view all the published apps that are on that environment. And we've chosen a very specific app in this screen. And it shows us that this news and weather native application is deployed for Android phone, and there's 3 versions of it. There's version 1, version 2, and version 3. So over on the right is where you can manage your upgrade policy. You can say that for this specific version, there's a mandatory update. For this other version, there's an optional update, which means they can skip it, right? And just by setting this configuration on these different versions, we can control what the users are going to see. We can decide when to make them make an update available, and then when to eventually force them to upgrade. So just to demo what it looks like on the client side, inside of Visualizer, we're building the exact same app with different version numbers. So this version that we built has the optional upgrade, so they get the message. You'll notice they have the skip and the update. If they click update, it'll take them directly to the Enterprise App Store screen where they can take the update. So just by changing the version here in the metadata of the application, they just rebuild it. Now I'm running version 2. That's the one that had the mandatory policy. So they're only going to get the option to update. At that point, they can't get past that screen. All this is built into the SDK. There's APIs for this, so there's not a lot of coding you have to do. You just set the policy on the back, and it'll check the server to see what policy is enforced. So this is version 3.0. No message comes up because there's no policy for the latest version. They use the application like normal. So the next few slides, we just want to show you some additional enhancements. I'm going to let Faizan quickly summarize this screen, and then I have a similar one for Fabric.
Yeah, so apart from all the features that we talked about at the beginning of this session around Visualizer and around the framework, we also have a lot of other enhancements in this release. Enhancements, a few more enhancements on the tooling with respect to how you can upgrade Visualizer with to move to a to the latest fix packs, or to move to a rollback to a fix pack as well. There are a few changes to save your storyboard layout changes and things like that. And then you have a lot of widget and API enhancements as well. So we make enhancements to our widgets and APIs with every release. In this release as well, we have a bunch of enhancements across the different widgets and the different sets of APIs. And finally, we also keep enhancing our underlying frameworks and underlying libraries to support the latest in terms of the native capabilities, and latest in terms of our external integration. So we have added support for Android Q, which supports Android Target SDK 29, and then support for the latest Cordova 9.0 as well. Back to you, man.
Great, thanks. And then on the Fabric slide, just for the sake of time, I'll call it just a couple key things. In object services, there's more support for invoking custom code. If you're familiar with our app versioning now supports engagement services. We've enhanced some additional metrics in our service monitor. So if you're not familiar with service monitor, you should definitely look it up on Basecamp. You can enable it on the runtime, and it gives you a lot of great insight into the performance of the APIs running through Fabric. So we've added some more metrics to that screen. If you use our OAuth provider built into Fabric, where it pops up a login screen on top of your backend identity, we've given you more customization capabilities on what that screen looks like. We did add support for IBM WebSphere Liberty application server for on-prem in this release, because that's IBM's answer to Java 11, because V9 needs Java 11. So there's now an option for the IBM app server, but you have to use Liberty. Our engagement server has always been able to send authentication codes over SMS, these OTP codes. We now support voice. So you could also send a phone call with the code, which is similar in a lot of application authentication flows now. One quick shout out to the Basecamp ideas. If you do have feedback and feature requests, you can put those into Basecamp under the ideas tab. This is a list of some that was included in this release. And we always look for those, and you can review those and vote them up so we know what's most popular in the community. And then lastly, next steps. V9 Service Pack 1 is available. You can go to Basecamp, basecamp.temenos.com, go to the release tabs and Quantum downloads. You'll see that if you want to pull it down locally. If you're on our cloud, just open a support ticket and ask them for the upgrade, and they'll schedule that for you. There's a What's New page here that walks you through all the details with links to documentation. And there's also a Basecamp article out there that summarizes a lot of what we talked about today. This webinar has been recorded, so you'll get an email with a link, or you can find it on Basecamp. Please share that with anyone else you think they would be interested. And that with that, Tanmay, I don't know if you want to wrap us up with anything else I may have missed.
No, I think that's it. Awesome. Thank you, Matt Trevathan, Matt Terry, and Faizan for this session. It was indeed good with great details you all shared with the audience. I'm sure today audience found it valuable and excited already about the new release. I want to thank the entire audience today for joining us today. As he said, the recording is available on Basecamp. It will be available in a few hours, and then you can share it with your friends or colleagues in case they missed it today. If you have questions, the Q&A panel is still active. You can post it over there. And then we will make sure we give you answers of all the questions that you post today. And in case if you have it in future, then you can go to Basecamp forum and post questions there. And we'll make sure that we add tag experts and SMEs in forum and give you answers there. I'm going to put myself on mute, but we are still active. The Q&A session is still live. So make use of that, post your questions over there, and then we will close the session. Thank you so much, and do visit the Basecamp events page and register for the future webinars. And we hope to see you all again in the next webinar. Thank you.